And the recording's off. It's on. So let me introduce Songshu and Ian. And Songshu, we did add some notes here, but feel free to take this discussion with an introduction.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for inviting this meeting. So, I'm Sungsu from the I-1886. So, the Gotham asked me to the about how to improve the translating in OpenStack documentation. So, for now, the I-1886 isn't very active right now, but I've talked with Ian about a few ideas to help bring it back to the life. So at the first we are still working on migrating from Janata to Webnate, but uh, actually the for me and the other volunteer are very busy now, so it is still ongoing project. So, but but I think that we can set up a very earlier version of the, the document translated for the key project like Nova, Cinder, or Neutron Glance on a webmate. And then fortunately the webmate supporting the machine translation. So I think that we can translate the whole document in those projects with the machine translation at first, and then uh, I'd like to ask to the Asia communities to help translate uh, those documents into their languages. So um, I think that for now, the Asia communities are very um, close and talk each other very much. So we can translate the OpenStack document into the Asian languages first, and then share it with the global OpenStack community to encourage the further translation uh, participant. So, for example, the South Korea and Indonesia, Vietnam and China and Japan, then I can ask those communities to get more translator in each countries.
So, if I may say something, because I was in the forum session at the Asian Summit. So basically, the problem that we have currently with the translating team is that there are not a lot of contributors, as Shangshu explained.
Mhm.
But when discussing, I think when we started to discuss, we found maybe it was also due to the fact that the documentation that we have in all the projects are not really translated. So some people want to start to work, for example, on OpenStack, but they are not able to have any kind of specific documentation. So maybe instead of just trying to ask folks to translate directly some, because of what we want to modify, we need a lot of folks. Instead of asking folks to look at the translations, we
Mhm.
could maybe try to first translate the documentations that we already have, and maybe we'll have a more a better community, community. Sorry, but that's what we discussed. But no, I think at least for me, I have I have some questions. I wonder about multiple points. First one, if we want to translate the documentations for every project, then I guess what we can start to do is maybe use basically what Shanson said, is maybe try to process all the documentations. It could be nice, but then, for example, every time that someone wants to modify the documentation, how we could be, for example, creating a new job for like running again web late for that. My, I mean, my main concern is that given we know that we need to verify the translations from web late. I mean, I wonder what we could be doing. Like, should we like first try to run web late for example, for only for Nova and Cinder, let's say, see how it works, and then modifying the translation by web late. And then I mean, I don't know. That's my main concern. If we start to do it, I don't want to have some kind of late document. I wouldn't want to have some documentation that would be stale, right? If, for example, if we start to translate some documentations, we need to make sure that every time that we modify the translation, it's also translating as well. Because if the translated documentations are stale, then people won't use them.
Okay, so you're if I understand correctly, so your concern is how we continuously translate the document every release cycle, right?
Yeah, basically, you're correct. You're correct, Sanchu. My main concern is that I'm cool with like I'm definitely happy with first trying to translate our current documentations. That would be maybe the first thing to do. See whether we need to modify a lot of what translated, because if we need to modify a lot, that maybe means that maybe web late is not really good. The more web late can translate, the better it would be. But that's what also we discussed, right, in the Asian summit. I guess you guys from your team would want to verify that basically the translations are good. Translations are good, but then that also means that, for example, if someone wants to modify some specific documentation, you also need to verify that, right? That's my I don't know, Shangsu. I guess you know that for every project, this is possible to create a new change. For example, every time that we create a new feature, every time that we have a new implementation for a feature, then sometimes, for example, someone is modifying the documentation directly in the same change than the feature. If you prefer, than what it's implemented. So yeah, that's what my main concern is. I want to make sure that this doesn't need to be. You said maybe every cycle. Maybe that's probably the right way. But every cycle, we need to make sure that what was modified on every project documentation will also be translated.
Okay, so
Yeah. Thank
okay,
you.
sorry.
Let me already elaborate. The first thing is that for translation stuff, and then we can divide into uh, project translation, for example, Horizon and related translation, and the documentation translation. So for Horizon and plugin project translation and the country, then we are maintaining with master branch and also then stable, a few stable branches. And then on the other hand, for documentation, then we stay just on master branches. And then, yeah, and about as all might be familiar, then about 5 years ago, then we decided to change from documentation team into a special interested group, and also the following with this, I-18 team also converted into a special interested group. So what I couldn't, so thanks a lot for the suggestion. While then what I would like to more see is how uh, which documentation has much more view. For example, then everyone goes to docs.openstack.org and then see the main page, dashboard page, and then click each document, and then you just go to Nova documentation or Swift documentation, Shindo documentation, and so on. But still, for documentation team previously, then documentation core reviewers could see some kind of Google Analytics dashboard to see how which documentation view is the most like that. But and also then I had some views, but now and then I think I think it's good suggestion. While on the other hand, I couldn't see the which documentation has more view on which languages, so that if IEAT and SIG also get such information, and then yeah, we can Songsu can drive more Asian communities to translate more. That's the first thing I want to mention. And second one is then uh, previously then IET team wanted to have uh, translation check site. For example, then checking whether Horizon and plugin project translation is qualified. IET translators can verify or not. And then for translation, documentation translation, then we can better check, for example, using Joule check. And then after see, then we can see a draft site by clicking Joule and then clicking the detailed link. On the other hand, and then I still see that it's not translators friendly. So then translators still have difficulty to check documentation translation. If we can address with new idea on translation, automatic translation with AI, and then we can verify the translation so that translators can see easily which document or that this document is well translated, or for this part we can change that, that will be great. So yeah, I just wanted to add two perspectives.
Go ahead, Sean.
Just on the machine translation piece, that's kind of a separate topic from AI, but we do currently have a policy that any patch that is being submitted is submitted by a human. So while we could evolve to a direction of using machine translation tools as part of the translation process, the actual submission through whatever tool we're using, whether it's Garrett or a separate thing, will still need to be done by a human saying that this is compliant with licenses, all that kind of stuff. So we should try and avoid moving to a model where we are automatically generating the translations and they automatically get merged, because the current policy we have with the core team is the core teams of the individual projects are more or less meant to accept the translations that are done by the translation team as is without reviewing them properly. So they already bypass the core team's review process. So we do need to make sure that if we are going down the AI route, that it is properly being reviewed within the translation team before it gets submitted up to the core team as well.
Sorry, Sean. Are you saying that every time someone is proposing a patch, modifying the documentation, then we'll also have like the translated documentation as well?
No, I'm just saying that if the translation project is adopting ML or other AI assistance,
Gotcha.
that it still needs to be submitted by a human, reviewed by that team as if it was
Yeah.
written by that human for correctness, And at that point, the other teams can accept it as it has already been peer reviewed, but we shouldn't move towards a model of it automatically submitting a translation patch whenever we change the normal docs using an AI model. Because if we do that, then the core team has to actually take on the burden of doing that review of the translation content and making it correct. I don't think the core teams can do that. So that was my only comment, really.
Thanks, Short. Jeremy?
Just to be clear, we do have changes that are auto-generated and proposed to Garrett today. So, like, not necessarily
the requirements, right?
Right, not necessarily generated by AI, but well, even the translation update changes that are auto proposed. Those translations were made by a human, presumably, but the change proposal itself that turns it into something that is usable by the software is done by automation and is proposed by a non-human user in the change review system. The only thing that the foundation board of directors really said was necessary in situations where we have automation proposing changes is that the commit message needs to clearly spell out that this change was created by an automated system and where it came from, so that it doesn't try to pass itself off as a patch generated by a human.
I think what Sean's getting to, though, is that there needs to be human review at some step, which we do have with the current translation, right? When people propose a translation in Zanata or Weblate, someone else approves it, then it becomes, that's now translated. And then the automation is simply ferrying that data from Zanata or Weblate and then putting it into Git. Right. But there's still been human review and submission in the process.
Right. So the concern is to not overwhelm the core review team with a bunch of changes that nobody has looked at before then, basically.
Arno?
I don't think it's even overwhelming that no one had looked at it. I think big thing is that the core teams just don't even have the linguistical skills to verify that the translation was correct. So someone who is native speaker or sufficient enough needs to make sure that those translations are correct. We are just expecting them to be correct at the point when they reach the project repos.
Yeah, the project teams right now basically it's not breaking any of our jobs as far as we can tell. So i.e. it's syntactically correct, but we're not reviewing the content of translation, because if I was to review a translation patch for Japanese, the best I could do would be chuck it into Google and try and back translate and see if it seemed reasonable. I can't actually do a proper review of that, so it still needs to go through human review at some point on the translation side, and then the core teams can say it's not incorrect Pythonically, but we can't actually say if the content is correct unless we're a native speaker there.
Right, and that makes sense because it's basically like if we had AI generated code changes, you don't want someone submitting those for review if they don't actually know what that change does.
I mean, that was a very good question, Sean. I even really thought about where the translation should land. If that has to land into the project's repo, then basically we need some kind of gate, some kind of reviewing rules that will make very clear about the responsibility of those of the ownership of that specific directory. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I agree that I agree with the fact that that's a really good concern. That I don't want to put burden over the core team for reviewing patches that they're not able to review. But I assume that this is maybe a technical point that we need somehow to identify as part of the migration to Weblate, to that specific process, and will maybe need to ensure that the commit rights over. I mean, I don't know. I don't know where. I don't know. I don't know where
Sylvain,
it's
can I
possible
interrupt for
to
just a second? Sorry, I had to time box this discussion. So I just wanted to ask. It feels like the weblet discussion is going to happen tomorrow, right? In the AI89 room. So
Yeah,
maybe.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Okay. So is it possible to probably catch up over there with the remaining part of this discussion? But before we end, though, there was a question on what if there is an immediate task to the project teams to do anything besides paying attention to this discussion and helping.
Yeah, right now, I think my as Chris is still, how can I say it? We are using currently a WebNate Cloud thanks to Foundation's wonderful support. On the other hand, the WebNate Cloud version is also automatically updated. So right now, and then yeah, previously, Brian worked very hard to integrate with OpenInfra ID, but now it doesn't work. So such kind of infrastructure problems we still have. So if I18 team can get help on such kind of infrastructure changes, that would be great.
Thank you, Ian. Anything else?
So how about WebNate migration perspective?
Yes, for me, I working with making the new Joule jobs and the task, but I'm not familiar with the Joule for now, so it'd be great to get some guideline to the how to adding a new Joule job in a current CI platform. Yeah, so because we have two more.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, because we have two more.
No. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. So we have two more volunteers from the Korea community to help migrating from Janata to WebNet, but it is very difficult to learn for us the how to using the Joule and how to adding a new task in the current project config.
So I think the individual teams can help you with that. If you're trying to do for Nova, etc., we can help work with you on that job. If you're trying to do a generic job, that's a little bit harder. One thing I don't know if this was already discussed is we do have some entry translations that do exist, but we don't currently publish any of them in the doc site when we update it. So is that one of the jobs you're trying to work on? Or had you a very specific job in mind that you wanted help on? The reason I'm asking is that we do share common job configs in a lot of places. So if it's something generic like publish all of the docs that we already have translations for, that can be done in a common place and then shared with all the projects. But if you wanted something for pulling from this new translation system, then that probably needs to go into its own repo and be a custom Zool job, to interact with that.
Okay.
Yeah, Shongshu, if you want to share that as in the notes, please feel free. And we'll catch up in the I89 room after this. Sylvain, final thoughts, and you can close out the discussion.
Just one point that Ian briefly thought about. It's about maybe the Sphinx support about different translated documentation. Maybe when we are discussing about that, maybe we are missing some Sphinx experts that would help us, like having different views of the same page. And I just want to have that action item to be written somewhere.
Without going into detail, it's likely a tiny tweak to the OpenStack Teams thing. So we can just put in the link and then having a standard naming convention. So like /en whatever /f4 whatever. so that we can go to the correct vendor page.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Let's move on to our next topic. Songshu, Ian, Sylvain, thank you for bringing this discussion here. And since we have most of the attendees join in, let's move on to our next topic, which would be the vulnerability management around your project. So a few questions that are dropped over there. Feel free to just add bullet items and note what you would like to. Firstly, the project that you're maintaining, is it managed under the vulnerability management team? And we already have the answers over there, but feel free to expand if you're in the process of getting this VMT managed. Management for the repositories you're working on, or you've spawned up new repositories and they're not there in those in that list. Feel free to add stuff there. And if you're a PTL or a security liaison for your project, do you have the core security teams on Launchpad or Storyboard? Are these teams up to date? When was the last time you checked? And who are these people that are on this team? Are they still active on the projects and so on? Please feel free to add the notes on this stuff. And the third question derives from that second question: do you have permissions to view this core sec team on your project? Do you have permissions to control it? Do you to moderate it, and so on? An important thing to check in this checklist is whether your core sec team is owned by the OpenStack admins group on Launchpad. If this core sec team exists on Launchpad, Jeremy, I'm not sure what the equivalent is for Storyboard, but is that something?
Yeah, in Storyboard, teams who are using it can just reach out to me, and I can set up groups. There's not a self-service group management solution there, but we basically have security groups for each of the Storyboard using projects created there that we can subscribe if a security. But so Storyboard has a feature where you can associate groups with different projects, and for ones that are overseen by the VMT, we have a VMT team that is associated with all those OpenStack projects in Storyboard. And if someone creates a security bug or story in Storyboard, then the VMT is automatically subscribed to it, and we have per project team security reviewer groups that we can subscribe to that story once we figure out that it's opened against the right project and that sort of thing. But yeah, just reach out to me if you're using Storyboard and you have some question about how to check that. I can help you out.
Perfect. Thank you. And the next question is: do you have a security liaison? So in most projects, I know that the security liaisons probably have not been touched in a long time. So there is a list of security liaisons. I need to pull up that URL. But when was the last time we've revised this across projects? That was a checklist that we had for project teams today. So please please feel free to fill out all of these, because I can proceed to figure out one thing that we were spitballing here in the OpenStack governance. This came up at the Open Infra Days North America as well, and also in previous events and IRC meetings and so on. The issue is that we've had quite a few changes that are there as far as how open source projects and their security management goes. And most importantly, I think we're staring at new legislation that's coming up across the world, and for our own interest, I think it is time for us to review and revise how we approach security and vulnerability management within OpenStack projects. First things first is to dust out the room and try to clean things up as we are. And second, I wanted to bring the awareness across project maintainers here that we do have a vulnerability management team and a vulnerability management process for all of OpenStack projects, but this was opt-in. And there is a security SIG within this within the OpenStack realm that you can go to get any help. And this is probably something that we've over a period of time stopped doing consistently across the projects. So this is an opportunity to get back to it. A call out that 3 out of the 4 active goals that the TC is pursuing across the community. The TC is not really leading all of these goals, but there are community members like yourselves that are leading these goals. But these cross project goals, 3 out of 4 of them are security related. So it feels like the community has not taken its focus off of the security aspect of things, but it is the process, I think, that took a back seat. So there is a link to the Open Infra Days NA discussion, and I think I'll stop now. And I just wanted let some open discussion happen on this topic while you fill out any of these questions.
I'm not sure if this is in scope, but one of the things I've been wondering about for a long time is, as a community, does OpenStack think we should follow the same lead that the kernel has taken and register as a CSV authority, so that the only CSV CVEs that are filed for OpenStack have gone through the upstream security process? I know it's come up as a pain point in the past where downstreams will file things as CVs that maybe from an upstream point of view we don't agree with, etc., because of SLA things, or the reverse. They have pushed back on having it be a CVE because it would then require them to remediate it in certain SLAs. So it hasn't been something that I've seen come up recently, but it has come up in the past. So as part of this, is that something we should be considering going forward, or is it out of scope?
I think if
you're looking for an answer from the VMT's perspective, or at least my personal perspective, I'm not going to speak for the whole VMT, but I've been watching how that's played out more broadly in the open source security ecosystem, and it hasn't really stopped people, for example, from creating CVEs about kernel related problems. It does make it easier for the kernel security team to get CVEs rejected or removed rather than just having them marked as disputed, but it doesn't really stop them from being generated in the first place through other CNAs, though maybe that will get better over time. The other problem that I see is that we have in the past been fairly accepting of if other people in the community want to create a CVE for something that we don't necessarily think is a vulnerability. We've said pretty clearly in the past that that our view is that having a CVE does not equate to having an exploitable vulnerability in the software, that CVEs are just tracking numbers. And I don't personally object to people having tracking numbers for whatever they want to track. But the vulnerability management team only requests currently CVEs for things that we intend to issue advisories for. But that doesn't mean that there aren't valid reasons for people to request CVEs for other things that we don't issue advisories for or even create fixes for.
Yeah, so part of the reason I'm bringing this topic up is it was mentioned about legal requirements that are potentially coming in the future. And some of those legal requirements do relate to CVEs, etc. So that's why I think it's something that should be in the back of our mind, is whether or not we should take this route so that we can actually have a actual stance or participate in that process if we need to. I don't know if it's required.
I mean, I'm participating in a lot of those regulatory discussions already, and most of these things are not settled. And even once they are decided, they're not going to go into effect for quite a lengthy period of time. So much like software engineering, I would strongly recommend not prematurely optimizing our process for regulations that haven't even been entirely decided yet.
I'm not sure we have Julia in the room. We had some ideas floating around in the Open Infra days around one. I mean, some streamlining of the process, right? Not aligning it with the regulatory process, but right now we have quite a lot of disconnect across a lot of OpenStack project teams. I think one of the ideas there was can we have automatically all of the TC governed projects under OpenStack be under the VMT? So it's no longer an opt-in. It's more about if you're an official OpenStack project, you would your security management happens alongside the VMT, and you should pay attention to the other points over here about revamping your core security team and making sure that you have a security liaison that's actually active on the project, and so on. Does anybody feel strongly for or against that proposal?
Just to clarify, as when you say official OpenStack project, you mean something in the OpenStack namespace and listed as a deliverable in the governance repo on the products like YAML, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Good. I think it's reasonable to expect that they would all follow VMT, but I don't know how others feel.
Yeah, and it's not like we can, if we make a requirement for every official project to have a VMT license or team, that doesn't mean they will have, because if you see, we might have a few of the requirement which we are declaring as a required for the official project team, but they are not still doing due to different reason, either the number of contributor project team have, or all these things. So making a policy makes sense. So basically, when a new project comes, so they will understand the SVMT is mandatory, and that is what I think we should have. But my main question here is how we will implement that, and how we will solve the problem where teams are not even active or less active to merge the things, and we're requiring them to have more, the VMT license, active license to be there. So that's the main challenge we faced in multiple other places also, and in VMT also.
Or no?
Yeah, I really like the idea of adding that as a official project requirements, as long as the VMT can just handle the workload there. But yeah, I personally think it would be, especially for the smaller shrinking teams, a help rather than hindrance if those security bugs that flows in has a outsider eyes as well, instead of just relying on those teams to be able to handle them properly. So yeah, I think that is very good idea to include it into the project requirements.
Thank you. I think Jeremy.
Yeah, I can just speak to from a workload on the VMT perspective. There's a couple of different ways it could go. Currently, we already offer to provide the same sorts of assistance that we do to officially overseen teams to other OpenStack project teams as well, if they want it. And a number of them do take advantage of that. We also do end up with some reports of vulnerabilities in projects that the VMT doesn't officially oversee getting reported directly to the VMT contacts, because we're the most visible security contacts for OpenStack as a whole. And reporters generally don't differentiate between what we're overseeing and what we're not. So at bare minimum, we're still frequently handling, well, for some definition of frequently, handling intake for other stuff that would be automatically covered if we followed the current proposal. I think that it could mean a lot of additional workload on the VMT if things played out the way we do now, where a significant chunk of our time is spent trying to chase down contacts who are unresponsive in project teams. If, on the other hand, the OpenStack project as a whole got better about being teams being responsive to reports of suspected vulnerabilities, and trying to confirm things and provide timely feedback, it could end up being less work for the VMT than currently. It is definitely probably the least rewarding aspect of being on the VMT is trying to get a hold of people who have volunteered to handle these sorts of things for their team, but then never actually notice the bugs or don't reply on email, over IRC private messages, etc., when we actually try to get them to take a look at them.
Very fair, thanks. And yeah, I think the external expectations are big part of why I'm so fond of this idea, because we have things that kind of aligns us under the OpenStack umbrella while being on the official projects list. And I think what you just said, like just people approaching VMT regarding OpenStack projects, I think it would just make so much more sense if it's all governed under that.
Good job.
Yeah, I think most of things Fungi mentioned. So we should not expect like VMT team to work and fix or do the workflow for them, right? It's more of like they provide the guidance and do the basic workflow of making it public or discussion. So we still need, either it's a small project or a big project, we still need people to look into CV and actively respond or fix them, right? Because my main concern is obviously like making it this requirement makes sense, and even I'm not sure why we didn't make it in past or at the starting. But my main concern is that is not the problem we need to solve. Even though we make a requirement, that will not change anything. My concern is how we can make every team to understand and have some liaison, active liaison. Like we have the leadership, right? We do check their leadership with PTL or DPL liaison, whether they are active or not. So something we need to implement so that we can make sure like these projects are actively up for the CVs fixes or not. And that should be a regular check, not just the one time they are putting the license and then they disappear.
John.
Hey, I mostly put my hand up to say what G-Man sort of said, which was, I think I like the idea with my operator hat on that all the projects are following the VMT process. But I am a bit worried about the case where there's nobody about to help, and what's the official help? It would be bad if the VMT has to end up doing the patch, right? That would be a bad outcome. The only other thing I was going to say is I'm sure we used to say if there isn't a liaison, it's the PTL, which doesn't necessarily work everywhere. Or if the liaison doesn't talk, it's the PTL. That doesn't fix the issue, though.
That's the default for the liaison roles. If you are on the PTL model and there isn't an explicit one, it defaults back to the PTL, right? For the DPL role, there's 3 officially required ones: release liaison, security, and infra liaison. So if you're in that model, there has to be one explicitly.
Yeah, that's right. Jeremy?
Yeah, it's also come up in recent discussion. I can't remember if we covered this at the Open Infra Days discussion specifically, or if this was in earlier TC meetings where we were rehashing this, but a path of escalation for unresponsive teams would help relieve a fair amount of this. There was a suggestion that maybe a subset of the technical committee wanted to volunteer to be a fallback contact in cases where an overseen team was not following up on reports of suspected vulnerabilities. So that would give the VMT a easier way to try to get some project involvement in those situations early on before things become critical. An alternative way to handle that might just be for people at VMT to also participate more directly in vulnerability management team activities. I don't know which would make more sense, but just throwing that out there.
Thanks, Erno.
Yeah, I like that as well. One thing I wanted to add, just for the concerns about non-responsive vulnerabilities handling and teams not addressing those, I think branding wise and PR wise, that should be one of those things where projects are dropped out of the OpenStack umbrella. Like if you are not interested to address security vulnerabilities, you shouldn't be OpenStack project. I think that's just simple enough. Like it's really bad looking outside OpenStack as a whole if there is sub projects that are just not interested in addressing security issues.
Yeah, I think that the TC has acted as if that's the case already in past circumstances. The challenge is that the default reporting channels for suspected vulnerabilities are private, and the VMT isn't easily able to discuss those situations with the technical committee until up to 3 months later, when that embargo expires and we just go ahead and make the bug report public because we could never get a response from the team. So if we had a point of escalation on the technical committee, that might allow us as the VMT to bring these topics to at least a subset of the technical committee sooner, without concern that we're violating the spirit of the private embargo that report was made under.
Thanks, Clark.
Couldn't you notify the TC, maybe not in public necessarily, but it doesn't seem like you're violating the spirit of embargo if you say, hey, such and such projects are behind, like we really need them to do whatever is necessary to fix their backlog. Like you don't have to get into specifics, you don't have to call out these projects in public, but like the TC should be able to have that minimal information.
And
we did.
Fine. I'm basically asking for a more official, non-public notification channel for that sort of thing. If the idea is to try to bring this up to TC members in private, like I can reach out to them by email or something, but is there a more formalized, like, if you're not getting a response, here's how to follow up with the technical committee?
But Jeremy,
really that codified.
Didn't we do that with the Murano thing?
Yes, we did, and that was an exception.
Yeah,
but it was fairly egregious, and also it was a little different because Murano wasn't officially overseen by the technical committee anyway, or sorry, by the VMT. So it was a situation of vulnerability management team members were aware of a report of a suspected vulnerability in Murano, and we were trying to make sure that the people who were supposed to be taking care of Murano were aware of it and could work on it. And we already knew like that there was a changeover of proposed leadership for that team anyway, because that was being discussed at the TC level. So we kind of felt like the project was already defunct, and it was maybe a little easier to talk about that, and we brought it up in a public meeting of the TC rather than having some private way of bringing it to the TC's attention.
So knowing that a CVE exists, not what it is, but that it exists, and that there's potentially a number of days until the public embargo lists, and that there has been no response from the available team, is probably the maximum we could communicate, I think, in that case, without actually violating the embargo. I don't know if we could go any further than that, because any pre-disclosure of an embargo is weakening the embargo, and you have to be very restrictive of what information you convey, because even the title of it could be enough for people to figure out, oh, this is what I need to look at and find it. So you have to limit it. But yeah.
Set aside the assumption that there's necessarily a CVE, because if there's nobody around to confirm the report, then there's nobody around to ask for a CVE to be assigned either. These, in a lot of cases that the VMT is trying to chase down, these are things where we don't know if it's something that would be considered a vulnerability or not, but there's not even a subject matter expert from the project who can find time to look into it and determine if it's even a bug at all.
I was misusing CVE there. I meant potential security report, even if it hasn't been confirmed that it is exploitable.
All right, a time check on this topic. We do have a couple of other topics as well as part of this discussion. I think we have a couple of takeaways already, which is we'll follow up on the VMT process proposal that all of the OpenStack projects under the TC governance will be under the VMT process. This will be a TC change, a governance change, and then we'll talk about a subset of the TC as a path of escalation. Anything else that we're missing, or any other final thoughts on this topic before we move on? All right, over to you, Slavik, on Postgres CI.
Thanks. So I added this topic just to make like bigger awareness maybe, and ask others how this should be proposed done, if we will decide that it can be done. Because I know Ironic already decided to drop some PostgreSQL CI jobs, and Neutron team was discussing the same. And basically, so it seems like this is done per project. The decision is made per project, right? But if projects like Neutron, for example, will drop support for PostgreSQL, it will effectively mean that for most deployments, it will not be available, because I don't think that operators will use MariaDB for Neutron and then PostgreSQL for other projects, right? So, sorry. So yeah, I wanted to raise awareness of this, that Neutron is planning to do something like that, and ask basically what other people think about it. Should we maybe think about things like that in like the OpenStack wide, or can it be per project? So what are your thoughts about it?
A meta comment from the Nova side. I don't think we've had a Postgres Tempest job for several years, but we do still have Postgres in our unit and functional tests. So our functional tests will try to use Postgres as one of the database backends and run through all the functional tests. But I don't recall there being a Postgres job in our gate for at least 3 or 4 years.
So in Neutron, we have Postgres jobs, Tempest jobs in periodic pipeline. And we do have some functional tests, like for the DB migration or things like that in for Postgres, but those functional tests didn't catch some issues which we in the past catch with